Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Abby Waddell and I currently work as a managing consultant with the TrustWave Spider Labs EMEA team, the DEFA team, so that's digital response and digital forensics and incident response. I'm going to talk about credential attack recon detection and how user entity behaviour analytics and network intrusion tools fail and how false positives can be reduced. So basically organisations throw money at the latest tooling. But these still allow credential attacks and other recon activities to slip through the net undetected. And so this talk will demonstrate what tooling traditionally is flagged, several ways that they can be improved, and stop almost certain indicators of malicious and unauthorized recon activities, principally around credential compromise. So the attack signatures described will not only significantly reduce the likelihood of network and application compromise, but will also reduce the instances of false positives and improve detection and attack prevention earlier on in the cyber attack kill chain. So this is all based on research on the methodology of recent successful credential attacks and by looking at the offering of current network tooling, which basically fails to detect some key signatures at the recon stage of an attack. So here are some of the rules that network tooling traditionally filters on. Some of them obviously very important and necessary and pretty much standard in most applications. So what we've got is communications to and from blacklisted IP addresses and domains, accounts that escalate privileges, any use of administrative accounts, use of previously breached credentials, unusual system deployments and changes, unusual account changes, network request rate, concurrent logins and multiple account lockouts, system access and changes, and unusual data transfers. So I'm going to describe some of the attack signatures that could be incorporated into the tooling to detect and prevent credential attack recon activities which aren't presently in these tool sets. So this has basically been observed through researching some of these major tooling applications at the moment. So the use of nonsense or gibberish words should be detected as this is indicative of web form credential recon activity. So such words may be used when quickly filling out a dummy registration form to gain legitimate access to a site, or to test site responses to form entries. So gibberish words are more likely to be used if the form is filled out many times over. And the way to screen such gibberish words is to look for the presence of two or more letters which are not usually paired in the English language anyway. So for instance, a double Y or HH, and also the presence of three or more of the same letter, so for instance, AAA or BBB. So the presence, and also the presence of all numbers in a form field which expects to receive alphabet characters, such as first and last name fields. Nobody has a number in their name. The presence of special characters, which, again, where they would not be expected, such as a physical address. And the use of non-existent domains after the @ symbol. So if anyone's ever done any pen testing and you're quickly checking a site to see what the responses are, it's just easier to put in a load of garbage words. You don't really need to fill in an actual address if you're just literally just trying to get away with testing the minimum. But obviously attackers use that technique too, especially if they're cycling through several credentials. So one can screen for repeat form post requests, but the presence of these non-standard words or characters basically reduces the likelihood of any false positives. Another typical recon action when testing credentials is to ascertain from the application's responses whether a username is legitimately in use. So once a valid username is established, the attacker can focus on any password attempts. First attempted will be a definitely valid username with an invalid response password. So to test this response, it's relatively easy to get this set up on a form. Most registration is free, and you can do that, and you can test the response. This valid username will often be one that's been obtained through the legitimate but the dummy registration. So the system responds to this initial attempt with an incorrect password message, and then the attacker will try a different credential, which is deliberately nonsense, to see whether the application produces a different response, which it does. So here it shows there is no record of this user. And now that the attacker knows that the account enumeration is possible on the application, they can feed in some usernames to see if these particular usernames are registered on the site by checking for this specific incorrect password response. So such system response patterns should be flagged, especially if they happen within a short space of time. Again, it's helpful to screen for the gibberish letters as per my last. So how does this particular screening differ from what might already be in place in your tool sets? So basically, whilst error messages can maybe be picked up on in your average toolset, screening toolset. So this basically is the order in which they're done, which reduces the likelihood that this is a false positive. So a genuine user is more likely to trigger an incorrect password message, or less likely there is no record of this user, followed by any incorrect password messages, but is much less likely to have the pattern of errors shown in this slide here. So it's the order in which the error messages come through. And as any pen tester who's ever brute forced accounts knows, almost every single list of username or password entries, namely ones that come built into cracking tools or ones that could be found with a quick Google search, such as the top 1,000 most common passwords. And obviously you've got the password list built into tools like Metasploit. They're fed into the brute forcing tools unchanged. So the script that iterates through each item on the list does so in the same order each time. An attack detection tooling should note the first 3 entries of these lists and flag when they are used in this order in succession immediately, as opposed to waiting until 1,000 attempts are made. So this will also point much more definitely to a malicious attack taking place. And monitoring should be focused on web pages which contain unencoded or unencrypted user IDs in the HTTP requests, as these may have a strong likelihood of being targeted by those seeking to exploit account enumeration and compromise weaknesses. So user IDs are often tampered with to achieve the same using web request and response proxy tools, which enable post and get request parameters to be changed on the fly in order to test the application's response. So it's worth flagging any requests made to such pages in a short space of time, rather than blanket screening absolutely every page on your web application, which obviously it increases how much an administrator has to go through to detect any kind of anomalies. If you can, get the lists of any publicly leaked credentials from previous breaches, both pertaining to your company and to other breaches, and take the first few entries of such lists and feed this into the attack signatures. And if you want, you can also search and bring up a list of your company email addresses from a recent breach, and then note the order of the first 3 entries and block or flag the connection. So even if these particular accounts are not used or no longer used, or they are in use but the password has changed, their use will still point to an attempted attack with a high degree of certainty. And essentially that's what you want. You want the intel on the source IP address or the source of any such attempts, because even if they might not be successful, it provides a useful source of intel, which you can then marry up to other attack behaviours that you might see further on down the line. So this is something which is probably almost certainly being flagged at the moment in your tool set, but just in case, it might be worth tweaking it so you're not just screening for account login attempts using the same username, but you're screening rapid attempts using different usernames as well. And one thing, a good thing to look for is flagging repetitive backlinks and onward links by site users. So this is about detecting repetitive site visitor user patterns, looking at where they've been immediately before arriving at your company site, and then where do they go afterwards. So if the same pattern happens repeatedly in a short space of time, this could basically indicate a credential reuse or credential stuffing attack. The attacker will be testing to see if a particular credential works on the site's notice. And if there are a lot of credentials to test, the same sites could be used over and over again in the same order. Not always, but it just adds to the attack intel pool. So the preceding and onward sites don't have to be malicious or suspicious. So suspicious sites could include, say, email finder applications, leak credentials for sale, site scraping tools, and so on. But in this example, it just shows benign sites being visited. So what we have is the visitor has gone to Twitter. Again, this is not a proof that they are doing anything suspicious, but a credential reuse attack will look at, hey, I'm going to try and test it on Twitter, then go onto your company site, see if it works on your company site, and then leap on to the BBC or whatever, another benign site, because they're testing the credentials in more than just your company's site. And so, as I said, this could be for innocent reasons, but it's just added to the attack intel, really, the overall profile of what's going on. And again, if you can marry this up with other behaviours, then you've got a better picture. So the series, quite important to note, the series of repeating patterns doesn't have to happen one after the other, but I would say in a short space of time. So if you're seeing this but interspersed with other requests, but overall, say in the space of an hour, you're getting a huge proportion of this particular pattern, then that could be fed into the attack tooling signatures. Flag non-existent subdomains and web directories in URLs. So site visits to predictable but non-existent URL directories indicate high probability of suspicious recon activity. So typical attempts will be on the login and the administrative directories. So for instance, by prefixing the site name with VPN or webmail or mail, etc., and also appending predictable directories after the site name, such as /mail, /cpan, or /login. Obviously, your site, your web's infrastructure may have indeed these prefixes, but it's just, again, it's adding to the pool. If you're seeing a lot of these guest attempts, especially if you don't have these sites, these directories in place, then it could indicate credential recon activity. Also important to spot are possible signs of tampering on the upper level directories, which are presented by an application. So, for instance, in this example, www.test.com/user equals 2000. And so basically, instead of the link that the site would automatically direct visitors to. So the actual company page or whatever would be ampersand homepage start /account. But if you're seeing, and that follows after the user equals 2000, but if you're seeing a direct hit on the user equals 2000 instead of the full redirect, then it indicates potential tampering with that parameter. So in this particular case, the attacker will be looking to see tampering with the 2000 to see what responses come from changing the 2000 to other numbers. And if you're seeing a lot of these URL combinations in a short space of time, then it's likely to be suspicious. So again, especially if these URLs are not actually part of your application. So normal versus suspicious behavior shouldn't be flagged for internal corporate users, but also for external site visitors. So one particular behavior that would be deemed for is to look at site actions immediately following any registration. So a normal user will probably browse on specific links, shop for a product. Hang on, sorry. Got the wrong slide here. And so, a normal user would go to your site, register on your site, browse for specific links, shop for a product, or post a message, for instance, within, say, an hour of initial registration. But an attacker, on the other hand, would attempt some sort of URL parameter manipulation or code injection within this first hour. So the use of sequential letters and numbers being used in either the password, username, or the other user interaction points should be flagged. So examples of this include password 1, password 2, and so on, any series of numbers or other sequences. So this is less likely to warrant flagging, but could still be relevant depending on your industry. So it's useful to cross-reference any non-existent physical address entries made by users on your company websites, or return to sender postal mail addresses with other behaviours. So attackers may, as part of any enumeration, create dummy addresses as part of a fake registration. And this may tie into any returned snail mail, which uses the same dummy address. So one example of this is when the dummy registration automatically triggers the sending of a form or other printed material in the postal mail, which then needs further action from the user in order to complete the registration process and get an account on the site. A high number of two-factor authentication verification messages, also unknown device or browser warnings, and also forgot password messages to an account could point to account compromise, which could also be used as a springboard to access other sites external to your company or access your company system from this compromised account. So if your site isn't a direct target but has weak security, an attacker will use your site to get control of an account and any credentials in order to then attack other sites which the user may have an account on. And obviously vice versa. So a member of staff's personal email, for instance, may be used to compromise their own company, the equivalent company account. So any recon or account testing may trigger the sending of these system messages to a particular email address in your business. So you basically need to flag whenever a high number of these messages are sent to single or multiple email accounts in a short space of time. Some larger companies have a list of those staff members called VIPs who have additional monitoring and protection, and such staff are usually the top-level executives. In addition to maintaining a list of these individuals, there should be a list of new or less experienced employees, and those employees for which a generous, helpful, positive attitude is an attribute, such as customer service agents or sales, as these are all likely to be phishing targets. So attractive targets are those such as employees who basically anyone is attractive if they present a weak link in the chain. It doesn't have to be the top CEO. It could be the new junior staff member who's just joined. So what we've got is, examples of this is a new hire who's not well versed in company security policies, a salesperson who's eager to make a sale, a customer service agent who really wants to help, the project manager who has an upcoming product launch deadline, and basically, so some security for some employees is seen to come at the expense of the effectiveness of their role, and attackers know how to play on this. It's worth flagging calls to follow on extension numbers from automated switchboards. So look at, in particular, calls made to administrative function codes, which may have default or weak PIN codes set. Also look at the high volume of calls to different voicemail boxes within a short space of time where messages are just simply not left. And also look at multiple account PIN code lockouts on voicemail boxes. So basically, why is this important? Because the company phone system can often provide a useful source of recon, in addition to obviously presenting a whole host of other attacks. But I'm focusing on the recon, the attack, credential attacks here. So if an attacker deliberately makes lots and lots of calls out of hours and reaches the voicemail boxes of staff, the resulting automated greetings in those mailboxes will often provide the name of the staff member and their job role. And likewise, multiple calls to voicemail boxes where no messages are left points to possible recon activity. And lots of these calls in a short space of time could also indicate PIN number guessing. and PIN numbers are usually only protected with between 4 to 6 digits, and that still represents a viable attack vector. Screen or blacklist IP addresses belonging to well-known rotational proxy services. So such proxies facilitate web scraping and brute force activities and also hide any source IP addresses. Free VPN service IP addresses should also be screened. So many of these services rotate addresses from a large pool of IP addresses, and if you know what these are, then you can blacklist or flag them. Screen for identical interval times between each login attempt where the user agent is the same. Now, this is different to traditional screening of the number of login attempts in a certain time period, which most network detection tooling does screen for. So, automated brute forcing tools can change their speed for each login attempt, but they can still be identified as suspicious from the interval timing of the login request. So, not whether there's hundreds made in a short space of time, but whether each time the submit enter button is clicked, it has almost the same interval of time between them. So here are some examples. So what we've got is traditional flagging of number of requests in a specified time period. Might be, say, 100 requests or more per minute. Then suddenly the alarms get triggered. Additional flagging could also be done based on the similarity of interval between each login request. So when an automated tool, attack tool, is being used, the interval period is more likely to be the same. So in this case, 5 seconds between each login attempt. But if the login attempts are done manually, again, could also be someone who's trying to guess credentials, there would be some varying time intervals as shown in this example. So a genuine user, the manual attempts, so we've got varying sort of 4 seconds, 7 seconds, and so on. And then a genuine user attempting a set of logins, this will usually happen because they've forgotten their password or because they've had an inactive session timeout. So their intervals will show what wider differences between in each request. So what you're looking for is the manual login attempts above and the automated ones here at the bottom of this slide. Sorry. If you flag, it's good also to flag repeated login attempts over a greater time period, so at least a few hours. Traditional screening looks at a set of failed or successful logins within a short space of time, so for instance 10 concurrent attempts within 10 minutes. So such suspicious logins should be monitored in case the attacker is trying repeated attempts across a longer period of time in order to get around any failed account login restrictions. So traditional tooling, I say, only sort of looks at that short 10-minute period, accounts lock out, and that's the end of it. You should be looking at a few hours, because in this example, what we see is 5 attempts are made on the Joe Bloggs account, but because the attacker knows that after the 6th attempt, the account will be locked out, he or she stops trying. So they try 5 attempts, then wait a long period, 75 minutes in this case, because the attacker knows that the account guessing can resume after this time. Obviously, different applications have different restrictions on this. And he knows that after 75 minutes, the account lockout or any kind of restriction will be removed. And then he resumes the account guessing with 5 more tries, followed by waiting for 75 minutes and so on. So the wrong account tries should be screened by your tooling. It's a mistake to think that attackers just try 1,000 attempts and, or tens of thousands. No, sometimes with credential reuse attack, they know roughly what the passwords might be. So they don't need to run tens of thousands of attempts. It might be they've got a list of 20. So it's worth their while waiting a few hours to cycle through these 20 ones without them triggering any kind of alarm. Monitor email forwarding rules to thwart attacker persistence. So I basically discovered last year that the Outlook desktop app can have forwarding rules created that bypass a company's Exchange security rules. So even if there's a company-wide Exchange server policy to prevent automatic forwarding of emails to external accounts, this can be circumvented by setting up a rule to add any external email in the email holder's CC field using the Outlook desktop app. So while the genuine account holder could spot unauthorized rules, if they scrutinize the CC fields of sent emails, these are not always checked, or at least not straight away. So even if there's a few days delay, this could present a serious data exfiltration issue once an attacker can create this rule in a compromised mailbox. And so you should be flagging these forwarding rules. So this is an example here of creating a rule called send to hacker. Any emails that this unwitting user sends externally or internally, the email will automatically add the external Yahoo address to the CC field. So here I send an internal email to Joe Bloggs, who works in my company. And as you can see, the rule adds the external attacker address in the CC field without my knowledge. Obviously, if I do scrutinize my sent mails and I happen to see that in the CC field, then yeah, the trick has been rumbled. But how long does that take? Who actually checks that all the time? Even if a few emails get through, that's still a risk. So I did contact Microsoft, and they said there is no workaround or patch. That was a year or so ago, so not great. So to conclude, improved attack behavior detection signatures need to be included in the network tooling, which give a high indication of malicious activity at the recon stage of the cyber attack kill chain. So an improved awareness of recon activities will provide a better picture of an attacker based on their methods and adding to standard threat indicators of compromise. And it goes without saying that reducing false positives will help focus efforts in a more productive way. And yeah, hopefully this has highlighted how credential attacks can be detected with better rule sets. Thank you for listening. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer afterwards. I don't know what the time is, so. Okay, thanks.
We have one question.
Oh.
Is it on? Oh, there you go. Thank you so much for this amazing talk. I just have one quick question. So you've listed out a lot of these rule sets and a lot of ways to identify compromised credentials via performing recon activity. Through your responses to these incidents, have you found a select few that are, like the silver bullet, if that exists, right? These are the things that, if you see, are highly correlated with compromised credentials?
It depends on the company and the business, really, what sort of setup you've got, and obviously the tooling that you have in place. I haven't been on the screening side of the network, on the network side, to look at that in any great depth to know, oh yeah, that's definitely one, or that's definitely one. But it's definitely something that the manufacturers, the developers of these applications should be considering. So from my threat intel and my forensics work that I've done, and pen testing as well, I would say all of these are very important. Again, some businesses, it depends what they do. There would be more emphasis on some of these signatures than others. But ultimately, if it reduces the noise and you can actually hone in on what is almost certainly a malicious attack, that saves work for everybody. And if it's a no-brainer to add these signatures in, then it's worth doing.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Abby. Round of applause.
Thank you.